Erev Tov, Dan.
Erev Tov, Rabbi.
Hi, Debbie. Hi, Josh.
I'm going to come as myself very soon, okay?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Even better than the picture. If I can say that.
Oi, Rabbi. Toda.
Hi,
Okay.
Annie. Hi, Gavi. Hi, Ayab.
Hi, everyone.
Sarah.
Hi, everyone.
Josh, I think I said before.
Hi there, Rabbi. Hi, everyone.
Waiting a minute, people to come in.
Debbie, come live.
Hi, Dan.
Yes, I'm in 5 minutes, I promise. I'll be live. I promise, Annie.
We'll keep you up to date.
אני פשוט אוכלת מרק, אני מתה מרעב, אז לא נעים לי.
אין בעיה.
We'll forgive you.
תודה. Moshe Rabbeinu is with me. Moshe Rabbeinu is with me.
Moshe Rabbeinu, did you give him soup?
Ken.
He's not hungry at the moment.
Yeah.
Lentil soup was Bereshit.
Sorry?
Lentil soup was Bereshit. Now we're on Man.
I said he's got enough on his plate.
Yeah, man soup. Man soup. No, it's a Slav soup. Slav.
Yes, Slav.
Okay, I think we can begin.
Where's Yossi anyway? Is Yossi anywhere?
Yeah, Yossi is doing other things. He's a busy guy.
Oh.
Shia Bari, amen.
Okay.
So how do I get onto video from my phone? Wait.
The bottom left, right next to mute, there's a video. You press it.
On my phone. I'm not used to
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Hi, Deb.
Hi, my dear. On my phone as Rega can.
Okay.
Oh no. Okay.
Okay, so we are beginning Parshat Yitro, very fascinating parasha. I mean, we've said this before, every parasha is fascinating, but Bereshit, until these parashiot are so amazing, but Yitro is really a central parasha to the entire Exodus, more than any other parasha in the entire Sefer Shemot.
Maybe
And that is because
mute us all, maybe it's a good idea to
okay,
mute.
1 second. You could just unmute yourselves if need be. So we are beginning an incredible parasha, and the reason is the reason is because we know Sefer Shemot began with essentially Moshe Rabbeinu catching up with God. At what point? We mentioned this time and time again. At the burning bush, where he's instructed to go and save the Jewish people, or the Hebrews. And now God tells them, I want you to take them out of Egypt. Why? For one purpose. Can we get back to that? I'm using 5 chumashim here, to be precise. So I'm just going to
They're all the same. Why do you need 5?
They're all different.
The same.
Different pirushim. Yeah, you're right.
The
text is the same, the commentaries are different.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just going to quickly turn to a pasuk we've mentioned in the past.
To bring them to the land of Israel, that's why.
No.
Annie,
Does not say
the
that.
rabbis talk.
Okay, Perek Gimel, chapter 3.
Which parsha?
Parshat Shemot, this is right at the beginning. And we're going to talk about Yitro Haimeyer. We're going to talk about that soon, but I just want to bring you back to a little bit of history. Chapter 3, Pasuk 12. ויאמר כי יהיה עמך וזה לך האות כי אנוכי שלחתיך. And he said, going to be a lot of page turning this today, I think. Again, chapter 3, Pasuk 12.
12?
Pasuk 12.
Yeah.
Pasuk says, and he said, for I shall be with you, and this is your sign that I have sent you. והוציאך את העם ממצרים, when you take the people out of Egypt, תעבדון את האלוהים על ההר הזה. In this very spot, the Jewish nation are going to be united and they are going to receive the Torah. So essentially, the reason why coming out of Egypt is to get to the point of Har Sinai, receive the Torah, and then eventually end up in Israel. But we know that kind of got put on hold for 40 years because of the
Sidetrack.
Sorry?
You got sidetracked.
Sidetracked, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I would also just bring to your attention a reminder exactly, the story just prior to this is the story of Yitro, where Moshe Rabbeinu is pretty much gets kicked out of Egypt. And this is chapter 2, Pasuk 15 and going forward. And he eventually leaves Egypt. He gets a sword put to his neck. And eventually he flees the country and he ends up in Midian. And he ends up by the well. We know the story of the daughters of Yitro. And Jethro's daughters are saved by Moshe, who eventually gets invited in. And Moshe takes hand in marriage, Tzipporah's hand in marriage. He has a child called Gershom, and later on has a child called Eliezer. Okay, that's just to remind you of who Yitro was and what's Moshe's relationship to Yitro. Moshe married Yitro's daughter. So we are essentially beginning the 6th parasha, and we said there are 2 main focus points in this parasha. And if you want to put it like this, the parasha is split into 2. First half of the parasha is all about Yitro. Now Jethro comes with Tzipporah. We don't hear much about Tzipporah, by the way, but Tzipporah, the wife of Moshe, she's like dotted around throughout the Torah. Interesting element over there. Moshe's children don't kind of show up as a central focus point throughout the Torah, although people sometimes misread that. When Moshe Rabbeinu eventually wants to go and give over the leadership to the next leader of the Jewish people, he suggests to God that he should give it over to his son. Now, Moshe wasn't one of those, leaders who are corrupt and just, want to leave it in the family. He obviously genuinely felt that his son was up to par to lead the Jewish people in the next level to go into the land of Canaan, to Israel. But God says, no, I want Yeshua to do it for a specific reason, because he was a student, he took it in more than your son. I'm going to go into that now, please God, down the line when we get there. But that's, 40 years' time. But don't worry, you don't have to wait 40 years to hear this. Please God, as we go through the parashiot. But the truth is, Moshe Rabbeinu is going through this whole period, and we'll discuss in a minute when this period was. But there's this whole Yitro thing. There's the next part of the parasha, which is a continuation of this coming of Yitro, to when Yitro gives his famous advice. Ve'ata techazeh, go and set out people. There should be a whole judicial system, basically, where, there's many different types of judges, and basically a breakdown to avoid burnout of, such great leadership. Yitro just felt like, this is, if you continue on this road, you're just going to get burnt out. So just take off the load, and the greatest things should come to you, the biggest issues, like, the Supreme Court. And then, there's the low claims court and so on and so forth. And that's the whole parasha. At the end of that pasuk, I just want to point this out because it's going to be very important at the end. Pasuk just before Revi'i, pasuk Chav Zayin, chapter 18, pasuk 27. V'shalach Moshe et chotno, v'yelech lo el artzo. Moses sends off his father-in-law, and he went to his land. Okay, that kind of wraps up the story. The beginning of the parasha talks about how Jethro comes, and it finishes off how Jethro goes back. Now, That's part one of the parasha. Part two of the parasha is the central focus of how now we're going to talk about the Jewish people now start traveling towards from Refidim, Bamidbar, Sham, Israel, Neged Ahar. They arrive at the wilderness of Sinai, and they encamp there. Rashi says, very famous Rashi, I should point it out to you. Vayichem Sham Yisrael. Have a look at Rashi over there. Very, very important Rashi. Rashi, chapter 19, pasuk 2. Vayichem Sham Yisrael. Rashi says, the Jewish people encamped over there. Says Rashi, Ki ish echad belev echad. Very famous line. As one man with one heart. He said approximately between 2 to 3 million people are encamped around the foot of the mountain. Ki ish echad belev echad. Says Rashi, doesn't stop there. Aval sha'ar kol hachaniyot b'tarumot u'b'machloket. But you should know all other encampments were with complaints and argumentation. You're muted, Ellen. This is chapter 19, pasuk 2. Second Rashi on pasuk 2. Vayichem Sham Yisrael. That means this was a very unique situation where the entire Jewish people were actually united together as one. But after that, it went pear-shaped. Okay. The parasha continues. There's a whole, a week's preparation from the 1st of Nisan, B'chodesh HaShelishi, from the third month, third of Sivan, until Vav Sivan, Zayin Sivan, 6th of Nisan of Sivan, 7th of Sivan, Machloket in the Gemara, in Shabbat, exactly what day it did happen. Did Moshe Rabbeinu add another day? Exactly what he added, or was it just a night, just a day? Whole discussion. According to the Talmud in Masechet Shabbat, Har Sinai, the great revelation of Har Sinai actually took place on Shabbat. And essentially what happens is they prepare, huge long preparations, no one can touch the mountain, there's a whole breakdown.
But if it's Shabbat, aren't they blowing shofar? You're not allowed to blow shofar. God
blows shofar. There is a shofar. Vayhi kolot ubrakim was all from God. The kol shofar chalak me'od was part of the great revelation. Someone pointed out, in the 6th parasha, you see the first time the importance of marketing. You see how the Torah is so descriptive on, the noises and the eshen hakivshan. There's the and Hashem descended upon it with fire. Smoke ascended like the smoke of the lime pit, and the entire mountain shuddered. Very, very descriptive. The Torah is very descriptive in this story. The sound of the shofar grew. There was a key element to all the factors of sound and sight, so on and so forth. God was a master at that. He understood.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question. Maybe I missed it. How do we know that it happened on Shabbat?
The Talmud in Shabbat goes through the whole system. He makes a whole breakdown about what day we came to Mitzrayim, and based on that, depending if it was on the 6th or 7th of Sivan, that would be a machloket when it actually was. But Talmud goes the whole machloket in the Talmud.
Okay, and the other question is, so in פרק י"ח, פסוק כ"ז, וישלח משה את חותנו וילך לו לארצו, you mean Yitro did not stay there for the מעמד הר סיני?
Fantastic question. We'll get there in a minute. I want to touch upon that. It's a very good question. Okay. So just before we deal with Annie's question, I forgot to say tonight's class is dedicated to Lui Nishmat Malka Bat Rivka, mother of Philip Cohen, Aleh Shalom, and also Annie's late husband,
Moshe ben Ronia v'Yitzchak.
Moshe ben Ronia v'Yitzchak. Tehei nishmatam tzura b'tzora chaim. May the learning be a memory for a blessing for their memory.
תודה רבה.
I have a question too.
Sure.
It sounds like all of them, God is talking.
When? What are you talking about? Where are you?
פסוק י"ט, ויהי קול השופר הולך וחזק מאוד, משה ידבר והאלוהים יעננו בקול. So, are they witnessing to the voice, to this kind of a revelation?
So, okay, that's a fantastic question. And the truth is, we can't do justice to this parasha. I don't want to focus on Har Sinai because really we need a series of classes just on Har Sinai, because Har Sinai is the cornerstone of Judaism, right? We became a nation, and a Jewish nation, at Har Sinai, right? We became a nation, we came out of Egypt, and God already chose us, but or made us into a nation, but we became the chosen nation at Har Sinai. So one of the primary fundamentals, or where it all begins, really is Har Sinai is not Yetziat Mitzrayim. It's interesting, we always say in Kiddush, Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim. We don't say Zecher Har Sinai. That's, again, another discussion. What we do want to, okay, I just want to finish off what it looks like. Har Sinai happens. Again, exactly what it looked like. Did Moshe speak? Did God speak? Long discussions. But at Har Sinai, the 10 Commandments were given. You'll note, just an interesting note, the Luchot were not said at this point. You'll notice nowhere in the parasha does it say anything about Naaseh v'nishma, the famous words. That's in next week's parasha. Interesting, what happened there. Interesting, there's many things which we're led to believe, if you want, but we just don't see it in the pasuk. So that's discussed at length. Also, how to figure out chronologically, basically, what's happening. That pretty much wraps up the parasha, and we have the parasha split into two. Again, Yitro, part one, he comes and goes, gives a piece of advice in the middle, and part two is the greatest revelation of all time, which, as the Torah says, happened once and will never happen again. Should also point out, it's one of the famous proofs of that the Bible was written by God, and that God is the author of the Bible, as opposed to those that don't believe that, is because God says,
פסוק כ' א',
okay, Chav Aleph, you say?
פרק כ' א'.
מה מחפשים?
No, there's a very famous proof. Okay, you know what? I'm not going to go into now. I wasn't planning to speak about it, so I'm not going to.
Very important.
I'll tell you what the proof is. I just can't find it inside the pasuk right now offhand. The proof is that God wrote the Torah because he kind of set himself up to failure if you say the following statement. He says that this will be the revelation which I'm going to do to the Jewish people, and it's not going to happen again. Now, if you, and there's another thing, he says, Atem reitem, each one of you saw what's going on. Now, the breakdown is, if you want to make sure that no one's going to kind of contradict what you're going to say, you don't write statements which can be disputed in the future, because you don't have the future in front of you. So you don't know if in 500 years' time, something else is going to happen. But the fact that God was able to say that and write it in the Torah up to today is because God has the future in his hands, and he said, this is what's happened, and it will never happen again. Okay, that's just a point, but that's not.
There's a lot of discussion we can have on this topic, but I understand you want to move on. So
Correct.
Okay. Because I'm not sure I agree.
Okay. It's the whole discussion. Torah at Sinai. We can.
Another time.
Yeah, but
Yes, Dan.
that's like way over what I'm understanding right now, what you just said.
Okay, I shouldn't have said that. I apologize. I do not want to go into this.
Okay.
It needs proper explanation. again, I just mentioned it very briefly in passing. It's a good thing to know that there are proofs to the authenticity of the Torah. Okay, we're not going to go into
Okay,
that.
for the authenticity.
What I do want to discuss this week is, before we get into the Rashis, which Rashi does touch upon in 2 places in the 6th parasha, but I want to try and figure out a very simple question, which is not simple at all, and has much discussion around this topic. So let's read the first pasuk, and let's see where we go with this. Vayishma Yitro, so we said that Yitro is coming. So where's he coming from? So first it starts like this. Vayishma Yitro. Yitro heard. Who is Yitro? Kohen Midian, a bit of background. He was the
high priest
minister of Midian, priest of Midian. Choten Moshe, claim to fame, father-in-law of Moshe. Vayishma, he heard. Et kol asher asa Elohim, all that God did to Moshe, leMoshe ul Yisrael amo, to Moshe and to. Interesting how pasuk makes a distinction between Moshe and the Jewish people. Ki hotzia Adonai et Yisrael mitzrayim, for he had taken Israel out of Egypt. Okay, let's just read some psukim just so we should get into the flow. Yitro takes the father of Moses takes Zipporah, the wife of Moshe, after she had been sent away. Let's discuss that as well. Where was she sent away from? Vechnei Banea and her 2 sons, Hashem Echad Gershom. Her first son's name was Gershom. Kemar Geri Tiberetz Nochriya, because when he was in Midian, he said, I was sojourner in a strange land. Shem Echad Eliezer, and his name was second son was Eliezer, Ki Elohei Avi Be'ezri, Vayatzileni Mecherev Paro, for the God of my father came to my aid, and he saved me from the sword of Pharaoh when he ran away to Yitro's house. Interesting. Again, chronological order, something weird over here, because Moshe really should have called his oldest son Eliezer, because that's first what happened, and his second son Gershom once he's in Midian. We'll see if we can get there today. Okay, let's carry on. Vayavo Yitro choten Moshe banav yishtol Moshe lamidbar, asher hu chonesh sham har ha'Elohim. And Jethro comes with his wife and children to Moshe, to the wilderness. Asher hu chonesh sham har ha'Elohim. So we already know geographically where he is. Where they were encamped by the mountain of God, by Har Sinai. And Moses goes out, he greets him, and then the pasuk goes on, and great kavod, great honor. You can imagine Rashi says, Moshe goes out, Aaron goes out, Aaron goes out. You can imagine their students go out, the students go out. You can imagine other people start going out, and eventually the whole entourage, the whole Jewish people go out to greet Yitro, the father-in-law of Moshe. That was surely a great welcoming committee. Okay, and then like we finished off, pasuk Chav Zayin, pasuk 27, finished off, Vayishalach Moshe et choteno, Vayelech lo el hartzo. Moshe sent off his father-in-law and he went to his land. Okay, let's try and figure out a couple of problems. So, we've got lots of issues.
I have many problems.
Rabbi, let's start with one problem. Let's just start with one.
Okay, so we're going to start with one problem, but it's going to evolve into various problems.
Many.
So here's the issue.
Okay, we'll give you that one, Rabbi. Let's start out with one.
So first of all, the question is, when did this actually happen? We just said the parasha is split into 2. We have Yitro coming, Yitro going, and then we have Matan Torah. Dan already pointed out, what exactly is it, Dan? Or was it Annie? I don't remember. What's going on? When did this period actually take place? So we know geographically where they were, at Har Sinai, as the pasuk says, Asher hu chonesh sham har ha'Elohim, pasuk hey, that they were encamped by the mountain of God. But if you look just a few psukim later, Perek Yutet, chapter 19,
That's quite a bit later.
B'chodesh hashelishi, the 3rd month from the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt, in this day they arrived at the wilderness of Sinai. ביום הזה באו מדבר סיני, ויסעו רפידים ויבואו מדבר סיני, ויחנו במדבר וכנשם ישראל נגד ההר. They journeyed from Rephidim and arrived at the wilderness of Sinai, encamped in the wilderness, and Israel encamped there opposite the mountain. It sounds like they hadn't yet arrived to the mountain. Yet we just said a minute ago that Yitro is arriving to the encampment of the Jewish people when they are encamped by the mountain of Sinai. So already we're hitting a problem, Sam, problem number one, where it seems to be that we're not sure when this story is happening. There seems to be a bit of a discrepancy in the Pesukim. Question number one.
There's a one bigger problem.
Go on.
Is Yitro still Cohen Midian is not a Jewish part of the
Exactly.
Correct.
You got my question.
yeah, why is it so nonchalant, the fact that this guy is still, in a different nation, and Tzipora is with Moshe, but we're not sure what is Tzipora's status.
Is
Right.
the wife.
Yes.
Well,
So very, very good. These are all very good
Rashi-
questions. And it
doesn't
seems to be
Rashi
the Torah
identify-
actually.
doesn't Rashi
Sorry?
identify that Yitro is actually called by several names, and when he converted to Judaism, he was actually called Yitro. So he
Yeter,
converted.
Yeter.
So again, exactly what point that happened. Okay, but Eyal's right. The Torah is specifying who he was, whether he still believed in that, whether he had gone away from that, whether he eventually converted. All these things are questions which we don't know from the pasuk as we see it.
Quite.
But one thing is very clear: Vayishma Yitro. Yitro is coming from somewhere, from Midian, with Moses' wife and children. Now, you would think, it would be nice if you can imagine that, the great revelation is about to take place. Moshe doesn't want his dear wife and children, or at least Yitro, doesn't want Moshe's wife and kids to miss out on the greatest revelation of all time. So he quickly brings them and journeys to the Midbar to be there for the great revelation. Interestingly enough, it says that he leaves, Yitro leaves, but Tzipora and the children doesn't say they left. We see they pop up later on, right? It's just also very strange that he would come all the way and miss the greatest revelation. I mean, wait a couple of days. I mean, this is not like, it's a big journey. So again, we just have to try and put things into perspective. Let's do our first Rashi, and then I want to bring a couple of other questions. Vayishma Yitro. So what did he hear? We just said in the pasuk it says, "Et kol asher asa Elohim leMoshe Yisrael amo ki yotzei Adonai et Yisrael mitzrayim." What did Moshe hear? Moshe heard all the things that God did to the people of Israel, and he had taken them out of Egypt. Says Rashi, "Ma shmua shama'u ba." What did he actually hear? Kriyat Yam Suf u'milchemet Amalek. He heard the splitting of the sea and Milchemet Amalek and the war with Amalek. We finished off last week's parasha with the war of Amalek. After the splitting of the sea, there was a war of Amalek, and now Vayishma Yitro. So you heard those two great episodes which had happened, and he comes from Midian to meet and greet Moshe Rabbeinu and the Jewish people. Now, first of all, where does Rashi get this from? We just said the pasuk says the reason why Yishma Yitro. Pasuk says explicitly why he came. He came because it's Mitzrayim, because God took him out of Egypt. What's Rashi saying? That he heard about Kriyat Yam Suf and Milchemet Amalek and the fight with Amalek. So, first of all, obviously the obvious question is, where did he hear it from? I mean, there was no Instagram then, there was no Facebook, there was no WhatsApp. What happened? How did he get the message? So this we touched on this last week. Pasuk by Kriyat Yam Suf says, Sham'u amin yirgazun. The nations of the world heard about Kriyat Yam Suf. We mentioned Rashi said, quotes the Midrash, that all the waters in the world split at the time of Kriyat Yam Suf, and therefore everybody started asking what's going on. Az nivhalu alufei Edom. There was the pasuk in Az Yashir. We talk about how the nations of the world were trembling in awe of the incredible miracles which happened to the Jewish people at Kriyat Yam Suf. There was a national sensation or an international sensation. Until what? Until Amalek arrived on the scene. Amalek came and killed that whole level of, wow, don't touch the Jews because God's got their back. And Amalek goes ahead and strikes them and kind of cooled the bath for everyone. And that's where anti-Semitism kicks in. Kill the Jews, no one's going to care. It's interesting to note, Rachav Hazonah, 40 years later, when they actually go into Israel, Rachav, who was a woman of ill repute, she was an harlot, according to most opinions. And that's why Yeshua sent 2 people to go to be by her, because that was common practice, and she hid them, and as a result, she got saved, her and her family. That's the story in Yeshua, when they took over Yericho. But Rachav actually says, later on, when she tells over to Yeshua, she says, you should know, the Canaanites are still petrified of the Jewish people because of what we remembered about Kriyat Yam Suf. So just imagine the after effect happened is 40 years later. The after effect is still there for the Canaanites. So the Talmud actually brings this opinion, and the Talmud says it was Kriyat Yam Suf and Milchamat Amalek. What's Rashi getting at over here? So the commentators explain, why did Yitro, out of all people, come to Egypt, come to the Jewish people, as opposed to everybody else? There's this great sensation, and everybody's so inspired. So why only one person? Says Rashi, Ma Shemua Shama Uba. What did Yitro hear? Everyone heard. Yeah, we know what he heard. Everyone heard about Yetziat Mitzrayim. But ask Rashi, why did Yitro actually come? Says Rashi, because of this thing that he heard about the Kriyat Yam Suf, the splitting of the sea, and the Milchemet Amalek, and the fact that there was a war of Amalek. There was this kind of polar effect. There was a Kriyat Yam Suf where suddenly everybody's in such a state of elation, and suddenly he hears Amalek coming, and we'll go and mess them up. When he saw that contrast, he realized if you don't act upon your inspiration goes out the window. Mashmu'ah shama uba, asks Rashi. Why Yitro out of everybody else? Why did he actually act upon it? Because he saw Kriyat Yam Suf. He saw Milchemet Amalek. He saw Shamu Amim Yirgazun. Everyone was so excited, and there were waves, pun intended, of people which was made in the national media from Kriyat Yam Suf. But not long after, the waves dissipated. Boom, Amalek are able to go and start up with the Jewish people.
Why not?
And they prevailed.
And they prevailed. You're right.
Why not to explain it?
But mere fact that they can go and start up just shows that you can have an inspiration and you can lose it very quickly. We say in Shir Hashirim, Im ta'iru im te'oreru. You can be so energized and so inspired, but how often do we act upon our inspiration? You have to make you have to make it a chefet, you have to acquire it. And that's when how do you acquire it? By doing something. Like reminds me of the story of there was a group who wanted to quit smoking. So the person said, okay, we're going to sit around the table and everyone's going to take their pack of cigarettes and chuck it into the middle of the fire, and we're all going to quit smoking. So the guy says to the mentor, he says, I mean, it's a very cute idea. We should check, I've got three cigarettes in my cigarette box, and I'm going to throw this box. I'll just go next door down the road to the petrol station, to the gas station, and buy another box. And what's the big deal? He says, yeah, but you have to do something. You have to do an act. You have to act upon your inspiration. You're inspired, act upon it. That's what's happening now. Mashmu'ah shama uba. Yitro realized this difference between getting inspiration, getting high, and then going straight back down, and then Amalek coming in straight in and messing up. He says he's going to come and join the Jewish people.
But why not to say that there's a different explanation? Simple one. that Yitro hears that Moshe is arriving and coming closer. He needs to get his son, his daughters, his wife and daughter. So Yitro is coming to bring them.
Coming close to where? Moshe is traveling away from him. He's
Well,
going to Har Sinai.
No, but they're going to reunite the families. When are they going to be with Moshe?
At what point did they reunite the families? That's what you're asking?
No, I'm saying instead of a Shmuah and all this, it's maybe simple. He heard that they're coming closer, and he wants to bring Tzipora and the two kids.
Doesn't say that in the pasuk. Pasuk says, "Vayishma Yitro kohen Midian kotem Moshe kol asher asar el Moshe Yisrael." Vayikach Yitro. The next pasuk is Vayikach Yitro, the wife and the children. The reason was not the wife and the children united. It was because he heard he brought the wife and children, not the other way around.
But the question that I think that Ayal's bringing is that how did Yitro know where they were in the first place?
Good question.
Okay, and then the next thing is, I think the idea is that, his wife and sons are here. I'm sure he wants to bring them back together. So that's the point. I'm going to take them over to be with Moshe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know why there's been such a thing, but he heard about the great party of the sea, therefore that's the reason. I tend to agree that in some cases.
Again, Eyal's asking the same thing.
Yeah.
We have to look at the psukim. What did the pasuk say? Not Rashi. Leave Rashi for the moment. The pasuk Aleph says, Yitro hears all the greatness which happened, and then Vayikach Yitro to go ahead and bring the wife and the children. It was not the result of wanting to reunite the family. Then he heard. Then and by the way, I also heard. Yes.
No, there's a stronger evidence to what the guys are saying, because it says that he heard everything that Hashem did to Moshe and Israel Amo, Ki otzi Adonai et Israel miMitzrayim. So they're leaving Mitzrayim. Moshe doesn't have his wife and children. So his father-in-law wants to bring the wife and children. So wherever Moshe goes, his family should go. And not only that, that's why afterwards he told, once he finished the mission, he goes back to Midian. He leaves.
Okay.
He needed to leave.
I'm prepared to accept your theory.
There.
We're gonna get to some other problems. Okay, let's run.
3 against 1.
Rabbi, just change the Rashi. Change the Rashi then.
Change the Rashi?
No. Wait, I have to show you the score.
We have a consensus.
Daniel.
I'm not counting down so quickly. Hold on a second. Okay, so we're continuing with this issue, which we want to discuss. Is when exactly did this thing take place? Okay, and he's saying he came, dropped the kids off, and left. Not a big deal.
Almost.
No. He stayed longer than that.
Oh, stayed a couple of days. He sees what's going on.
Yeah. He hung around for a bit, gave you advice, how to manage.
You want to stay. You want to stay with the wife. You want to stay with the daughter-in-law. You want to stay with the grandkids. For sure. But let's try and go through.
Yeah, but I'm surprised that he left. In fact.
Well, this was my original question. He didn't stay for Mamad Har Sinai.
If he came,
let's get there. Let's try it. I just want to say a nice Rashi Tevot, a acronym for Vayishma Yitro. So Vayishma Yitro, Vav Yud Shin Mem Ayin Yud Taf Resh Vav. It's this Rashi. You use the first letters. Ma Shmu'a Shama Uba. Yamsuf Amalek. Use the acronym for Vayishma Yitro. You got the Ma is the Mem, Shmu'a Shama is Shin, Vav is the Uba, Yud is the Yamsuf, and Ain is Amalek.
Yeah, but it's not in the right order.
Yeah, but that's in Rashi Tevot, in the way the Baraturim often brings things, the Baraturim has a nice gematria for this as well. We don't necessarily we're not restricted to orders. Just again, you don't have to take it, just a cute idea.
Rabbi, just a general question. Why the gematria is important? Why are you trying to find in the words this kind of,
This wasn't gematria, this was Rashi Tevot.
No, but it's a hidden.
The Baraturim also quotes the gematria in this.
Well, what's the point? Why do we need
why is gematrias important? So the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says gematrias are actually hen gufei Torah. Gematrias are a major element of the Torah. So I suppose the most simplistic explanation is that every part of Torah is Torah Emet. And something which was divinely given to us by the divine, by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, every part of it has to be mesudar. I remember I once had a rabbi who was a bit of a graphologist. He said he once tried to analyze the Sefer Torah, the writing of the Sefer Torah. He said from a graphologist point of view, it's very systematic, very organized. Everything's in place. Everything's got to be, aligned. There's a certain amount of spaces, same spaces, systematic all the way through the Torah. It's just a very organized fashion. Whoever wrote it was clearly very organized. But there's all sorts of developed theories. Some people like it, some people don't. I know people have become very close to Judaism from such things. There's the Torah code, if you're aware of. There's gematrias, there's Rashi Tevot, there's many different elements, but it's basically whatever angle you look at it, I think there's something to see the truth. You can't, if it's made up by man-made, you're going to make mistakes some way, even if you're an incredible mind. But to put everything together in such a unique combination, I think is just shouts out godliness, if you want.
Why couldn't have Moshe written it?
He did.
Yeah, but he was
He
directed.
He wrote it.
He was
Moshe,
directed.
we say, "V'zot haTorah shesam Moshe al pnei."
No, Moshe קיבל תורה מסיני ושרה
Al pi Adonai biyad Moshe. Moshe actually wrote the Torah.
That's
It
it.
was
So,
written by the word of God.
that's right, but Moshe wrote it. That's right.
Sure.
In this, at the end of Sefer Dvarim, it says that Moshe.
We say, Al pi Adonai biyad
ביד
Moshe.
משה, ביד משה.
Moshe actually physically wrote it. The only thing that was not physically written by Moshe was the last 6 psukim, which is discussion exactly who wrote it.
His death.
It talks about his death. Did God actually dictate to Moshe exactly what happened or what's going to happen? Or did Yeshua write it? Why was it part of the Torah then? Again, that's a discussion in the Gemara. Again, we'll have to get to the end of Sefer Devarim to discuss that.
Let's
But-
get back to Yitro.
Let's get back to Yitro.
So why did he leave? I don't understand.
Okay,
If-
so
if
let's
he
try
recognized-
and hit
Very
that.
simple, Daniel.
Slicha?
It's very simple.
The truth
Simple,
is,
because you know why I left? Because it wasn't part of the nation. It says Zalach el artso. Yitro is not joining the Jewish nation, and that's the
Yeah,
problem.
but
But the problem-
there was all kinds of Erev Rav that came out of Mitzrayim with Bnei Israel Gamken, and they all stayed for Mamad Har Sinai.
so one second. Let's just hang in there. One
Okay,
second.
good point.
There is a very important question which is discussed and it's centrally discussed at this point amongst in the Gemara already and amongst the Rishonim. Is the Torah written in chronological order or not? Very famous machloket, Rashi and Ramban.
No.
Is the Torah written in chronological order? The events transpired as they happened
No.
or not?
אין מוקדם ומאוחר בתורה.
So this is machloket in the Gemara. Is there yesh mukdam u'me'ochar b'Torah, Gemara in Pesachim? Is there such a thing as, is it written chronologically or not? There's much discussion, but let's take an example this week's parasha. You've got Yitro, the whole parasha of Yitro, and then you've got Mamad Har Sinai. Now, if you look, you don't have it in front of you unless you've got an art scroll stone chumash. If you look at Parashat Bahalotecha, this is the Sefer Bamidbar.
Chapter and verse.
Chapter 10, this is Numbers, chapter 10, Pasuk.
Is Perek Chet, Sefer Bamidbar Perek Chet is Balokha, no?
No, it's
Yeah. We're going to Perek Yud, chapter 10, Pasuk 29. Vayomer Moshe leChovav ben Reuel Hamidyani. And Moses says to Chovav, the son of Reuel, who Rashi says is Yitro himself, Choten Moshe, he's just got another name, the father-in-law of Moshe. Nos'im anachnu el hamakom asher amar Adonai oto eten lachem. We are traveling to the place which Hashem has said, I shall give it to you. Where's that? Ani, at Israel. Ve'etavnu lach. Ki Adonai diber tov al Israel. go with us and we shall treat you well, for Hashem has spoken good of Israel. Vayomer Elev, so basically Moshe is imploring his father-in-law to come and join him on the journey towards Eretz Israel. Vayomer Elav, lo elech. And he says to him, I'm not going to go. Ki im el artzi ve'el moladti elech, because I'm going to my land, my family, I should go. Vayomer al na ta'azov otanu ki al ken data chanotenu b'midbar v'ayite lo eleinayim. Please do not forsake us, and as much as you know our encampment in the wilderness, and you have been iced for us. And it shall be that if you come with us, then with the goodness which Hashem will benefit us, we'll do good for you. And then Hashem, they journey from the mountain of Hashem. This pasuk is where they left the encampment of Sinai 1 year after they're there. Okay? Now, this is 1 year after Ma'amad Har Sinai. How long were they at the foot of the mountain? 1 whole year. So, this is kind of a bit of an eye-opener to a conversation between Moshe and his father-in-law, trying to encourage him to come with them towards the land of Israel. Till just after this, they have the story of the Meraglim, and that kind of kills everything with the spies. And that's when they get cut off, they can't go to the land. And they're going to spend 40 years in the wilderness. But until then, this is what's happening. He's having this frank conversation with his father-in-law, come join us. And he just says, I'm going back. So this is a bit of an eye-opener to the pasuk which we're reading over here, where pasuk Chavtet, back to our parasha, which is,
so you're saying
that Yitro is going back. Now, 1 second.
But it's not,
you don't see anywhere that Yitro leaves and comes back.
Not good.
So you've got one simple explanation. The most simplistic explanation is this whole story of Vayishma Yitro, and he brings the wife and kids of Moshe Rabbeinu, and he eventually leaves. How long did he stay? We don't know which time period he came for, but it definitely happened after Har Sinai, and he's telling him to go and, come join us, and he actually says, I'm going back. Which, by the way, if you learn like this, it actually means that Moshe's wife and children were actually not there at Ma'amad Har Sinai, which is incredible.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is wild,
So
It also it kind of makes sense if you learn like this, that to divide the structure of the judges in thousands and fifties, everything, because then we would have had something to judge by.
Fantastic. That's what. Okay. So what Gavi's saying is a very good point. If you look at pasuk, Perek Yudchet, chapter 18, pasuk Chaf, pasuk 20. V'hizharta ethem et hachukim ve'et hatorot v'odat lehem et haderech el chuba ve'et ha'maaseh asher yasu. Yitro gives this piece of advice. He says, listen up, Moshe, you're getting overwhelmed. I'll tell you what you should do. Split up the judges and teach them and you should caution them regarding the decrees and the teachings. You shall make known to them the path in which they should go and the deeds they should do. Which teachings, which decrees? We haven't had Har Sinai yet.
It has to be after Ma'amad Har Sinai.
It has to be after Ma'amad Har Sinai. Says many Rishonim, Ibn Ezra, Ramban, and others, that this whole part 1 of the parsha actually is not written in chronological order and actually happened happened a year after Matan Torah.
Yeah, okay.
Fascinating discovery, but this is a key element. And this is, this is a big machloket Rishonim. Rashi, in this week's parasha, doesn't really point it out. If you look at Rashi in Pasuk Yud Bet, Pasuk 12, just to point out the Rashi, Vayihi mimachorat, just read the Pasuk, Vayashev Moshe lishpot ha'am, Ya'amod ha'am al Moshe min haboker ha'erev. It was on the next day that Moses sat to the judge of the people. The people stood by Moses from the morning till the evening. They want to ask him questions. And then Yitro sees him, and he says, what are you doing? And then they have a whole discussion. And he gives them
this solves some of the problems, all right, yeah.
So says Rashi. Now I'm just thinking, when I was preparing the class today, I was just thinking, the truth is, we're talking about the Jewish people. They just come out of Egypt. They're exhausted. They're emotionally drained. We spoke about last week. They're in this, still in the slave mentality. We're not sure what's happening. Counting 50 days towards Har Sinai. They're getting all busy, getting all ready. And you're going to tell me, in this 50-day period, there's all this, people asking questions, all about the Torah. It's just very difficult to understand. But if we take it to a year later, they've settled. They've been in the same place for a year. A lot of the places they were there for a couple of days, boom, pack up and leave. They're 42 mas'ot, Parashat Mas'eh. We go 42 mas'ot of the sojourns of the Jewish people throughout the desert. But it would seem very plausible that this story happened after Matan Torah, a year later.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
Rabbi, is it possible that Yitro didn't leave and stayed with them?
Sorry?
If you look at Bamidbar, Moshe tells him, don't go, we need you. And then it says, Vayis'u. Like it doesn't say that Yitro is actually leaving.
Right, but so you mean Yitro came a couple of times, you're saying?
What I'm saying, maybe
by us, this is Parashat he left.
In Pasuk of Zayin you're talking? Pasuk of Zayin?
In Pasuk Haftet by us, it says
Bamidbar Yud.
I understand.
Bamidbar.
Again, you have to put the psukim together, right? In Pasuk,
Rabbi, I have a question about Yitro and his whole role in this parasha. And to me would appear to be really the most significant piece to this parasha, in addition to Ma'amad Har Sinai and Matan Torah. What does Rashi say about the fact that this really a stranger, an outsider, comes into the picture and is giving this huge piece of advice to Moshe, who's, considered to be the be-all, end-all, leader of all time, and how this little piece of advice is like revolutionary. Basically, if you don't delegate, you're gonna, fall apart. There's something really far-reaching in that.
That's a fantastic observation. One could ask, if this was such a phenomenal revelation, and you would think someone as great as Moshe Rabbeinu would be able to kind of break down such a system. We're not going to actually go through the Psukim today because we don't have time, but there are certain discrepancies also between the wording of what Yitro advises Moshe and what Moshe actually repeats that he's actually going to do. I'll give you an example. You know what? Just because it's a nice, important idea. But just before I don't want to forget the point which I want to say. I think what Ellen's mentioning is actually a fascinating point. Gosh, there's so much to say.
I must have missed it. There's got to be more to it. If that's what
hold on, I'm just trying to pick what I want to say and what I don't want to say.
Okay.
We've got 5 minutes, so I'm just going to point out 3 points, okay? And I think we'll stop here. Number one, if you look at Rashi, the second Rashi on this parasha, Yitro. So Dan already mentioned, Shiva Shemot nikru lo. Jethro had 7 names. Well, Yeter Yitro Chovav Chever Keni Petuel. Yeter al Shem Shiter Parsha Achat Batorah. V'ata techezeh. Yeter, his name was because of the extra vav ve'ata techezeh, and you should see to set up a judicial system. He added a whole parasha in the Torah. This outsider, as Ellen pointing out, is coming with such an incredible piece of advice, which either Moshe did or didn't figure out himself. And this piece of advice is attributed to someone who's not part of the Jewish people. Incredible. He eventually came, later when Yitro converted and fulfilled the commandments, they added the letter Vav to the name, so his original name was Yeter, and now it became Yitro. Now, I just want to say a cute idea. Let's go further. Pasuk 21. So Yitro's got this information. He sees the situation, and he says, you know what? And you should see from amongst the entire people, men of means, God-fearing people, men of truth, people who despise money. Anshe emet son'e bata. People who despise money, men of truth.
אהיה אלוהים אנשי אמת שונא בצע.
Interesting to note that.
And he just
Interestingly enough, though, Yitro first of all asked Moshe what he's doing from morning to evening. What is he doing? And Moshe is the one that says basically he's answering the questions that people ask, inquiring about God.
Right.
All right. And this is where Yitro,
correct.
and where Yitro then comes in and says, you know, if you keep going this way, you're not going to make it. You're not going to survive. You have to come up with a better plan. Why don't you look at maybe, you know,
Strategic planning.
The elders to basically take on some of the lesser demanding questions.
It's very interesting. But look what he said. Look at the Pasuk. Pasuk 22. V'shaftu et ha'am is Yitro speaking. V'chol et, v'ya kol ha'davar ha'gadol yaviu elecha, kol ha'davar ha'katon yishptuhem. Yitro says, all the big stuff should come to you, and the little stuff should go to the other judges.
Yeah.
If you look later on the Pasuk, what actually Moshe Rabbeinu says, when he repeats,
changed.
26, V'shaftu et ha'am, they will judge the people at all times. Et ha'davar ha'kashe yaviu Moshe, kol ha'davar ha'katon yishptuhem. He doesn't say ha'davar ha'gadol, the big thing. But Yitro, his view is there's big and there's small. There's, $1 million and there's $5. The $1 million cases go to the high court. The $5 go to the small claims court. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't say that. He says there's difficult cases and there's smaller cases. The difficult cases, doesn't matter if it's $5 or $5 million, because if it's difficult, we have that equal understanding that difficult, it doesn't make a difference whether it's one or $1 million, because every person is important and every situation.
It wasn't the value of father-in-law, giving him, wasn't it to prompt something? It's like a student talks, it prompts something. If it isn't a verbatim rendition of what the student's 100%, it's not all as, so he prompted something and he went along with it.
It wasn't man, he doesn't have to. What seems clear from the Torah, and was what Rashi points out, that Yitro gets an additional vav to his name because of this thing where he said ve'ata techezeh. He says this is how you should do it. It wasn't just like, Moshe, this was attributed to Yitro as an incredible thing. An entire part of the Torah is added because of what Yitro added. Just want to point out back to Ellen's point. I think it's fascinating. Yitro, we said, he gets the vav. Why? Because the advice which he gives starts with ve'ata techezeh. And now you shall see from amongst the entire people, men of means, so on and so forth.
So
the problem is, problem is, if you look at the Pesukim, Dan, you pointed this out before. Yitro looked, he analyzed. Look at from Pasuk Yudalet, from Pasuk 14. He's analyzing, see what it is. Then he turns around to his father-in-law, he says, listen up, my dear son-in-law, I love you very much, I want to give you some great advice. Atashma Pasuk 19, Atashma Bikoli Yatzecha, Elohim Emach. Listen, heed my voice, I should advise you. Good father-in-law gives his son-in-law some incredible advice.
Yep.
But, so why does Rashi point out that Yitro gets the name Yitro with extra vav, starting from Pasuk Chaf Aleph, from 21, seemingly it should start from way before, 7 Pasukim previously. And I had such a nice idea from my Rabbi Kaufman, Alav Shalom, Rosh Yeshiva who passed away. He said such a beautiful idea. He says, it's so easy to give advice. Everyone likes to give advice. Yeah, but can you give constructive advice? Can you give advice which will actually, something will come out of it? That's the shtick over here. Yitro was no problem. He said, I'll give you advice, good father-in-law. Never give advice, somebody never asked for it. give me advice for? You never asked for it. You're not going to listen to it either. I said yesterday at the board meeting. I said there was a consultant to huge businesses, top dollar consultant who used to give advice, and they did a survey and they found out that most people who he actually consulted didn't carry out most of the business advice they actually gave them. A few points here, there. The overall thing wasn't actually carried out. People don't like to hear advice. Give advice, everybody's more than happy. To hear advice, I'll say, you do it, and let's see how you're going to do it. Then I'll give you advice. That's not so chacham. The point where it was now began constructive was when Yitro turns around and says, listen up, this is exactly how you should do it. This will help you for the future of Klal Yisrael. And once that was implemented, Moshe Rabbeinu was actually able to alleviate his system. So I think that was a very relevant point. Ellen, back to you. At the end of the day, when we talk about, if we go back to Sefer Bamidbar, where Moshe quotes or speaks about his father-in-law, Vayita lanu le'einayim, and you have been an eyes for us. What does that mean? It's incredible that an outsider can sometimes give a very unique perspective to a situation which we ourselves cannot see.
That's
appreciate
that's a really strong phrase.
I think it's incredible. Vayita lanu le'einayim, pasuk lamed aleph, perik yud, pasuk lamed aleph in Bamidbar. Chapter 31, pasuk 10. Chapter 10, pasuk 31. Vayita lanu le'einayim, a person can get advice from someone who genuinely cares for the good of the person, but you shouldn't just say, I know better than you. There's sometimes a perspective you may just have missed. Something as simple as a basic breakdown of a system. Yitro came from the outside. He wasn't involved. He didn't go through everything. He sees, he analyzes, and offers advice. Moshe Rabbeinu accepted it, and it became a part of the Torah to teach us this lesson.
But before he sees who Shema, that's the beauty of it.
That's beautiful. 100%. It's a beautiful idea. Sometimes you have to listen.
Or he speaks, he hears, and then maybe perhaps sees. We say God has given us 2 eyes and 2 ears, but only 1 mouth. So the mouth is the last of the senses we are to utilize.
And as the Gemara says, not only 1 mouth, but the 1 mouth we do have has actually 2 safeguards. It's got the lips and it's got the teeth. Really think twice before a word comes out of our mouth. So that's, I think, an incredible lesson we can take home for each and every one of us. Okay, what's up?
Did Moshe choose the right people, because he's just choosing Anshe Chayil?
Very, very good question. The Mefarshim actually speak out. There's a few points over there. It's strange because he's looking for Yirei Elokim, Pasuk 21, God-fearing people who are Anshe Emet,
Telling the truth.
Who are straight men of truth. Myra, is there such a thing as a God-fearing person? Not somebody who pretends he's God-fearing. A real God-fearing person who's not a man of truth? You don't. It doesn't work together.
Balaam.
We know the facade, and we know where it messes up, and we've unfortunately experienced a lot of that, right? Where people are not true to themselves. But a true Yirei Hashem, by default, has to be Anshe Emet, has to be people of truth.
Rabbi, the translation might not be accurate. Ki yirah, although we've heard that expression, and it's often used in certain very Orthodox Christian circles, God-fearing people. But Yirat Hashem, isn't that God revering, which is different?
Yeah, but
the same idea.
Yeah.
You have a God-revering person who thinks that truth is like a unique attribute which you can be God-fearing without the truth? No.
It's a spectrum. Why treat it as an absolute? There isn't one person that's absolutely this or absolutely that, right? It's a spectrum. We grow, we change. Why can't you be God-fearing and approach the truth? Who masters the truth? Who masters awe of God 100% all of the time, right?
Okay, but I can also argue who masters true Yirat Hashem. But the bottom line is, what to Eyal's point, Sam, to answer back to you, and to Eyal, at the end of the day, it doesn't say in the Pasuk they actually found those people who were all the above.
Yeah.
They, Moshe Rabbeinu had difficulty finding such people who with such incredible, attributes.
Don't exist. There isn't perfection.
So maybe
We
that's
approach
part
that.
of what Moshe Rabbeinu did. I mentioned before, there were
Rabbeinu
discrepancies.
wasn't perfect. I mean,
There was
he
discrepancy to what Yitro asked for and what Moshe actually did. Yitro was asking for a Superman, and Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Listen, I think you got the perspective wrong. You've got to get certain type of people who fit the."
he was simply describing that.
You're breaking up.
You're cutting out, Sam. You're cutting out. Okay, I think there's so much in this parasha. It's almost impossible to even scratch the surface. But I think what we came out today was there's this huge machloket, huge discussion, argument whether the Torah is written chronologically or not, and it manifests itself in this week's parasha, whether it happened before Matan Torah or after Matan Torah, machloket Rashi, Ramban, and different Farshim, Ibn Ezra, and there is this other idea of what we learned out from Yitro and how we see perspective from different people and how it can actually, we could take it into ourselves, and Yitro can actually have a whole parasha set aside for him because of this incredible lesson we can.
But we've got that even from the very first chapter of Genesis, that it's not chronological, because the commandment is that God created everything, man and woman, and he gave the command to multiply. And then all of a sudden we go into a garden after the fact, and Adam is in the garden by himself, supposedly. So it's not chronological.
No, one was the commandment.
The first commandment was when God produced, he produced, man and woman, and the commandment was to multiply along with all the animals. And then after that we get, and then there's a garden, and Adam was placed in the garden by himself, and we go through the story about Adam and how he wasn't happy being, and God noticing that it's not good for man to be by himself, and therefore we go through the next stage. But that's after the fact. So in other words, chronological, we right from there we know that it's not 100% chronological.
So we could argue about that, and if we have Sukkim in front of us, we can actually, all the Rishonim grapple with exactly the breakdown of the system in the creation. But I would also say that what happened at the creation is very different to the chronological order of events which happened to the Bnei Israel, to the Jewish people.
Okay.
And so, Yesh Mukdam Ucha B'Torah is very referring to the stories going throughout the 5 books of Moses to be able to say, is it chronological or is it not chronological? And that would be to have different relevant. I actually did speak to one of the great rabbis in America, in the US, Rabbi Shmuel Kamenetsky. I met him in New York 2 years ago, and I asked him, I said, is there any reason why the Torah would not want to put it in chronological order? Do we have any, why would the Torah want to bring Parshat Yitro over here as opposed to when it happened? There obviously must be a specific reason for it. He said, we don't know. But, I think he was being humble. But, there must be, Rambam points out, if the Torah is coming to say this in this era, so the simple understanding is over here, for example, that Yitro is coming because of what you heard of Amalek. Amalek was the end of last week's parasha. We'll bring Vayishma Yitro, Mashma Shama Abba. You heard this, change between Kriyat Yam Suf and Amalek. But really, the connection is not so much relevant to the actual story, rather what we can learn out from it.
Right.
Rabbi, I know you have to go. I was just noticing there are very few parashot that have the name of a person as their title.
Good question.
Yitro,
thanks, Rabbi, for
Korah.
Balak.
I want to ask Rabbi.
That's a great point, Ellen.
So,
Rabbi, you mentioned
Thank you,
that.
Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi, Dan,
Thank you.
Annie.
But on Tuesday, you mentioned that Yitro was so important that the Parshat was given the name of Yitro. But I was taught the other way. I was taught that in fact, if a Parshat got the person's name, it's very questionable about his righteousness or his value per se. And otherwise, why don't we have any Parshat that are named after Abraham? Why don't we have any that after Yaakov? I mean, those are exemplary people that we should be looking at, and yet we don't have any names, any parshas that are associated directly with their names. But we do have parshas that are associated, like Yitro and Korach. And Korach is not what we consider an exemplary person. So there is definitely something there that I don't know if with Yitro is the same thing.
I mean, there's Pinchas, and we actually point out his exemplary actions as who was actually a great-grandson of Yitro, right? We used to make fun of him. You know who your great-grandfather was? You know where he got this idea to start killing people? Because your great-grandfather used to have Torah. And that's why Torah called him Pinchas and gave this special parasha after that to bring out this point. You know who he is? Yitro. Do you remember Yitro? Yitro was the exemplary person who came to the Jewish people, looked at it, understood, and, don't forget, Yitro was also the father of Tzipporah, the wife of Moshe Rabbeinu.
Yeah.
We don't talk much about Tzipporah, but could you imagine what sort of woman Tzipporah was? It just put things into perspective.
Well, she was the eldest daughter.
Definitely a point.
Anyways, fantastic. It's unfortunate the time's out again. Run out. I could spend some more time, obviously, but it's fantastic, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Have a very good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.